Hello, good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are. Welcome again to another podcast episode on Talk Architecture. I'm your host, Naziaty Mohd Yaacob, and we are still on the topic of the new architecture curriculum. And this is the third part. We're focusing on the design problem. So when you talk about a design problem, how does this subject arrived? We will look at the problem with architecture education and, streamlining the curriculum objectives with qualifications framework by the Ministry of Education, like in the case of Malaysia. We had exercises on how the architecture curriculum or the architecture design studio curriculum in particular would be realigned or would satisfy the codes or the objectives of the Malaysian education system. So it referred to Bloom's taxonomy. And recounting this episode where that exercise was done, we look again to the pro forma of the architecture design studio curriculum and the learning objectives. And we try to do that based on the Bloom's taxonomy, and we list them out, affective, cognitive, psychomotor. And then there it is. We prepared the requirements so that the university can endorse the architecture program and hence validate the curriculum, the teaching curriculum. And so there we go. That has been done in the past. And what is that all about, really? When it happens, it is to ensure that the curriculum satisfy the Malaysian University qualification framework. But what does it do to the implementation of the curriculum itself by the educators or the tutors that is handling the studio? It doesn't do much, actually, because the language that has been describing the objectives has enough in it so that you can maneuver around it. I mean, it's not like something very specific. It has grounds and ways to maneuver it. And you would think that no two different universities are the same, and they have their own identity in how they want to teach. So you'd want to know that no two tutors are the same, and they would have the different take on it. But what you should also remember, with the good comes the bad, which is, well, if you want to say it that way, if you agree with me, I would like to propose that. The bad is your discretion, your taste, that you would deem to be an A grade, the student with the A grade. So what I'm trying to say is this is a crucial discussion with regard to that you left it to be too subjective in determining the fate of a student, that you're leaving it to the taste or the discretion of individuals to qualify what they deem as an A grade or a B grade work or a failure and so on. So understanding the design problem or how much the challenges that the student is up against at the different levels of learning, shall we say the first year, second year, and third year, we refer to a certain year that is the fifth year, because the fifth year is a project that the student conjure themselves with a lot of help from the tutors on determining the site and the topics, of course. Now, how can we prevent that the students' objectives are not similar to a lower level? You know, for example, if they were to say, I'm going to design an office block with a cinema and a shopping mall. It could be really challenging, or it could be similar to a lower year program. I mean, it sounds complicated in terms of the square meters or square feet in the area. It could comply to a certain notion of 10,000 square meters or something, or a development that would make it very complicated because it's huge. But in terms of the design problem, there could be very little. So in the end of the day, what has the student learned, and what has the student been challenged in terms of the complexity of the design? They could pass the program because they complied with certain requirements. But when it comes to design problems, it is very limited, for example. So they talk about special studies in the design thesis. They talk about, you have to do like a facade design or something to do with environmental science or structure, long span structure. This is very much something that you could do in advanced courses for construction, and even attempted at a lower level. So then you add some more. You'd think, okay, besides that, we'll have it to be very comprehensive. And then would ask the question about functionality, and maybe they would do an exercise to demonstrate that the building is to do with universal design or accessibility, and that complies a certain notion, which would state that the student is ready for the professional world. They are ready to graduate, and they could enter the profession, and they would not have much problem to start their architecture career. But we see a lot of students graduated and they felt disillusioned with the architecture industry. And there could be several issues with regard to that. But I want to focus on this one particular issue, which is, are they getting enough challenge with regard to, or challenges with regard to, design problems?
If you're a podcast host or someone wanting to be interviewed on podcasts as a guest, visit podmatch.com. Podmatch automatically connects ideal podcast guests and hosts together for interviews. We always say it works just like a dating app, but instead of connecting you for dates, it connects you for podcast interviews. Podmatch has connected over 85,000 guests and hosts together for interviews that listeners love, all while saving you countless hours of administrative work through built-in automations. If you're ready to level up your podcast interviews on either side of the mic, start today by visiting podmatch.com.
So you cannot leave it to chance. You cannot leave it to the architecture tutor, the responsible, to dictate the taste of the A grade. What it is that, have we had enough research, have we had enough discussion with regard to the level of competency and how much learning one has really to be prepared for practice? Now, this is a proposition. This is like a discussion piece This is something for you to think about out there, and you're dealing with your architecture curriculum or you're thinking about architecture education, you could actually entertain this point that I'm trying to make with regard to the design problems. Now, my taste. Okay, I'm talking about my taste. And I would defend my taste as an architecture tutor in my previous employment, for example. I was an architecture tutor that has dealt with the design thesis. So I would give you my taste, my take on what is the design problem and what constitute an A student. Now, this particular student, I won't say the name of the student, but what I would like to say is that this student should have been given an A. But the school, with their own taste, or the majority of tastes, evolve around the idea that it is not challenging enough for a design thesis because it doesn't have much buildings on it. So, but I would like to argue that this project delve into the fantasy and the reality of the architecture dream, in which it is rooted in real precedents and design problems that you can be found on site and in context of even urban renewal, urban regeneration, planning, master planning, architecture, and even detailed design of incorporating, shall we say, nature with architecture. There is so much thought and so much struggle that this student of architecture had undergone, in which it should be warranted an A grade. But this student knew that in the context of that particular university, they're not going to get an A grade, even though they're very talented, they're an A student. And we told that student, you're actually an A student. But unfortunately, you're in this school of architecture, which would give you a B, or a B plus. So his project was the Botanic Gardens. Yes, he was brave enough to actually put the word the Botanic Garden rather than the word a railway station or something like that, or a regeneration of this site with a railway station and a botanic garden. No, he would say the Botanic Garden. And you would see through the drawings that he resolved so many issues and interdisciplinary, intersectionality. One of them is education. Number 2 is infrastructure. Number 3 is to do with environmental impact using nature. There's so many levels of aspects and disciplines that he had to undergo in which to come out with a beautiful, beautiful resolution of a design, aesthetically and technically. Now, it didn't start out that way. It didn't start out, very, shall we say, obvious what he was supposed to do. He had to study a lot. He was with 9 other people. They were doing different sites. He was doing this strip of land that is like at the beside the highway, as at the border, and is inconsistent and doesn't have much logic to it. It's just a leftover land, and it includes the railway tracks and the train traveling to it. And the railway station was way to the corner of this neighborhood. And it wasn't really serving well where the railway station, and it's a bit having issues of safety and security. It's not directly linked to the city center. So this particular section of the neighborhood is an old neighborhood. When Kuala Lumpur had to be expanded because it's limited in terms of its expansion capabilities, they created a satellite town at the border of Kuala Lumpur called Petaling Jaya. So this part of the town, which is where the site is the old town. We call it the old town, and there is this old road. I mean, the road that is famous for Petaling Jaya, Jalan Osman, and then there was an intersection perpendicular to it. So what the student did was to take the railway station and place it at that perpendicular road to Jalan Osman, and you can literally walk to the city. And because the issue here is abandoned buildings, but there are quite a number of schools, and the schools are limited in terms of the expansion, in terms of activities. So this botanical garden development, which include the railway station tracks and a new station relocated, and it served the purpose of education because it's a botanical garden, because the botanical garden is like a research facility for understanding plants and natural environment with animals and other natural things to study. So what I'm trying to say is that a student of architecture in Malaysia trying to tackle this project, this site, having the vision to relocate the railway station, having a new gateway to create a master planning of ideas. I mean, it is the catalyst for the growth and development of this neighborhood. Tackling urban regeneration, urban renewal, how do you get the abandoned houses to be activated or people to come again? Because people are leaving and the elderly people population has burgeoned here. So there are old folks home and stuff like that. And it's this problem of, what another site that have abandoned houses, and then the local authority will say, all right, this is ripe for another bunch of shopping malls and offices and speculative development. That's the way to go all the time to make the land has some value. But then this student of architecture, this group, together with the master planning, decided, no, it's not necessarily the ideal situation to just have another development of condominiums or apartments, speculative development and offices and so on. Because this particular area essentially has also its own character, and it has a population that needs facilities and amenities to help it, sort of regrow, because it was booming before in the 60s, 70s, maybe the 80s, because the block that was done by another student, that was an office block that turned to a community center. That was the highest block. I think it was about 10 stories high. And so that's the highest point, really. And then we have a campus, an old campus that have been relocated elsewhere, so it's not being used. So another student decided to regenerate that bit, and then the library is brought forward to the bus terminal to regenerate that, and the wet market is added a couple of floors and to create a hub. And there were other as well projects that was kind of they're regenerative projects. And this master planning is like almost a genius way of looking into the problems, an alternative master plan to counter the developer's dream. So we haven't had any projects or a solution or a design problem, stroke problems, that could be on the side of the community, the elderly community, the youth, the children, the shopkeepers, the residents. What alternative vision can be made apart from just redeveloping it wholesale, putting the plot ratio more and creating it another high-rise area? So all in all, the students that did this master planning of this area of section 1, 2, 3, and 4, Petaling Jaya Old Town, really did a good job in looking into the different pockets of sites and looking into different design problems, like the guy who did the verticals community center, of taking an old 10-story building that is obsolete in terms of a lot of things, aesthetics, use, and regenerating into a community center with some budget hotel or hostel up there for migrant workers. So the reality of the short-term, mid-term problems are being addressed by all these projects. And back to the botanical garden project of creating a new gateway. And what more to celebrate it with a garden, a proper garden, because this garden will be near the university and people could go, it's a real garden, how to deal with the issues of urban issues where you need to regenerate a lot of these urban pockets rather than just totally demolish as usual. We have this problem, a bigger problem, the planning problem, the master planning problem, all over the world. We can learn from this. But what this student has done for this strip of land is to actually have that powerful vision of really reconstructing the dilapidation, the abandonment, the negativity that is there. There was also criminal issues in terms of security because a lot of people get pickpocketed or even mugged here. So, you can make this place alive again. So he has tackled a lot of the design problems. Architecture design problems include planning, urban design, product design, detail design, so typical building, types of building, and specific to the site design, taking in the number of square meters area and looking at how efficient it is. A lot of design problems have been resolved with this project. And when you look at it, it's almost a fantasy project. But no, it's rooted in real life problems. And the details that he detailed out were beautiful, magnificent. And how he incorporated nature into buildings. Experimental, explorative, very nuanced. And one could only applaud such a project. So back to the point of the design problem. Design problems could be many, numerous. And when you have engaged with all of them and resolved most of them, the product, the challenges that end up with the architecture drawings, architecture ideas, and all the requirements that the university wants to have the students to display is all there. So what more? Something like this cannot be replicated. One design is unique, novel in its way of approach. And he's done all the checklists. He's ticked all the boxes of how an A project should be. So what I'm trying to say is that design problems, which is something instrumental in an architecture curriculum, need to be at the, shall we say, at the crux of it all in terms of the assessment and the evaluation of the project and how you would say whether it's an excellent project or not. To look into every student's project to see what design problems that the student has challenged themselves and resolved. And that is the mark of a very, shall we say, a very excellent training program or architecture curriculum for architecture education. That the student has read a lot, that the student has thought a lot, that the student has drawn a lot, that the student has come out with the right solutions. And it can be seen in the design process from the very beginning, in the middle, and until the end. So when we look into architecture education and design this new architecture curriculum that will be presented in its whole entity after the next episode, I've talked about the case study in the second episode, how the student perceived architecture education in the first episode, and what they would encounter. And then taking that and focusing on case studies. And the third one today is focusing on the design problem. what I will have what I will do is in the next episode, create a rudimentary curriculum in which I will justify design problems and case studies in the different projects that the student would do in those 3 years. And then in the final episode, there would be the whole system. The whole system will be described from the beginning till they become an architect, a licensed architect. All the points will be dealt with in a way that it is clear what the new architecture curriculum is. So today, mark my words that if we need to push or need to put forward the architecture studio curriculum agenda in this century and to see the relevance of architects in this world and in this society, regardless of AI or whatever, we need to actually be clear. What are we putting forward? What are we trying to address in terms of who the architect is? It is not about taste. It is about real, critical, professional agenda of who the architect is. When the architect is able to address design problems when they were in school and thoroughly and well and, knowing what a design problem, and the lecturer or the tutor that is grading and assessing them validate the design problem solution, they will be confident to go forth into the industry and tackle any issues that will come their way in the industry using whatever tool at their disposal and whatever other skills that they have with regard to Revit, BIM, AI, and so on. So, the first step is the thinking process and the processes that the student of architecture has to deal with in order to come to that point where they will be ready for the industry. So therefore, this is the conclusion of how crucial the design problem is. Thank you very much.